All right. I'd like to call the special finance committee meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let it be noted that both directors are present. And are there any changes to the agenda?
No changes to the
No
agenda.
changes to the agenda. All right, I will motion to approve the agenda.
I will second it.
Do we have anybody for public comment online?
There's nobody online.
We do not. Nobody online at all. Okay. Move on to approval of minutes.
I
Yes.
motion to approve the minutes.
I will second the motion. All those in favor? All right.
I
Guess we're both in favor. Review of the 25-26 draft budget.
Yes, I'm going to go ahead and kick this off and just give a little bit of a high-level overview of what we've done in looking at the budget for the year. And then David and Angelica are here to answer questions, and David's going to go through the line items and with some more explanation. One of the things we had considered and directors had commented on over the past few months was the potential for the rate increases. We have approved rate increases that were approved as part of our rate structure. And with that, the rates can be up to a certain amount. And I don't remember if that was 14 or 16%. It was quite high. One of the things the board has the option to do is to not enact the full rate increase due to reducing costs and efficiencies with that. And some of the things we look at with that is the CPI is about 3%, I think is what we calculated for last year. And then we also were pretty heavy on some of the capital improvement projects. So those capital improvement projects, and we'll go over those at the end, for the years 25 or 26, 27, and 28 were quite heavy. There were a lot of ones that were line lowering, some improving fire flow in the industrial zones. And we looked at those, and with the master plan that we had last time called for those, but there's been kind of a change in the system, the dynamics of it with the placement of the new wells that we've done and the lack of growth in the industrial area. We're going to be recommending to maybe move those out a little bit further until our new master plan is done in a couple of years. And then if they're needed, we can look at funding those. But at this point, we're not going to recommend some of those projects. We were also looking at one of the main projects in that was a well. And we have some options that we have to look at for the Chromium 6 project in order to meet our maximum day demand. So we'll adjust some things, would like to adjust some things in the capital budget with that. With that, the numbers that you're going to see today are probably closer to 6%. Still not optimal, but 6% is probably a realistic number we can look at as far as any increases. And what we looked at with that is we have to fund, we have the CPI is about 3%. We still have to fund some of the capital projects. Some of them are covered with grants, and some of them we have to have a matching portion of the grants. So there are, those things we need to take into account. But, and also probably one of the main things is our reserve funding, our reserve balances that we want to maintain those. And they're set by the board. They've been adjusted over the years. But if we drop the rates too much, our reserves will dip down when we go into construction for some of these projects. But I think we've got it worked out to where we can have a reasonable increase and maintain our reserves and do the projects that we need to do, meeting the state requirements for chromium-6, which is it's not optional on that one. We have to do something, but we think we've come up with a reasonable plan in discussion with staff, with operations on how can we do that. We think we've got a good plan. So keep that in mind. So you're not going to be seeing, numbers of 16% across the board for rates or anything like that. We want to avoid that, and we think we've got that. And with that, I'd like to turn that over to David. And
Did we have Habib run the rate study or redo it?
yes, we did. I did task Habib. He's been working on it over the last month or so. We came up with some suggestions, and some of the suggestions were modifying the CIPs. And our last meeting with Habib was yesterday afternoon. And he said everything looked good at that 6% range. I did receive a call this morning from Habib confirming that. So I feel comfortable bringing this to the board. I think we might have one at 16%, or David has it available, but I don't think we're even going to consider that. So.
And then off the subject, free production allowance, are you looking at that to see what we can do with that?
Yeah, our free production allowance is definitely part of our rate structure. Mojave looks like they're holding off on any further ramp down at this point. They've done some modeling of the basin. So George has been working very hard with them on the inflow and outflow to the basin. And if they hold off on a ramp down, it looks like we're probably going to be maybe another 3 or 4 years before we have to start actually leasing any water. So that kind of is a bonus too, because that was calculated, and it would have been added to the rate should we need to buy some replacement water. That would have been included in the rates.
And the tier 1 would have went down the allotment for tier 1 of
Yeah,
free
the
production.
tier 1, we did drop the allotment as planned, but it was I think it was 2 units on the drop?
Correct. For this year, yes. And then the next year was another one and another one the following year.
Yeah. So I can't say that we can have the same lack of increase or the same thing each year because there's so many variables. Ramp down has to do a lot with it. And also the CPI and the capital. But I think we've got a pretty tight program here that we can present today.
Good. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Don. Directors. So I guess we're starting on big page 5, the budget detail. So that when we're looking at the top section, we're looking at the water sales consumption revenue, and we're budgeting that at a 6% increase. What we projected, like you talked about, we looked it over with Habib. And so we're seeing the same 6% applied to the fixed meter charges as well. With no additional consumption we're budgeting, it's kind of held steady. The amount of sales over the last year or two, it's been a consistent number. So we're staying with that number, and that's going to give us in water sales an additional $536,000. And if we move down to line 23, the special assessments or the standby charges, that goes down a little bit over 1% every year based on new connections coming online.
Yeah, so let me explain that because Gina, you're new. So the standby fee is kind of basically an availability component to our system. So if you're within 660 feet of a water line, the standby fee has been in effect for 25 years, and we've never changed it. If we ever changed it, tried to raise it, it would probably be wiped out. It would require a vote of the people to do that. So the amount of the rate that's collected is very outdated, but it is a component of our rate system. So, and that is collected each year. Anybody within 660 feet that does not have a meter. As people get a new meter in the system, and we have how many, 50 or 60 meters, what we did last year?
It was 70 last year. This year I'm projecting, about 60.
Okay. So any of those ones that do get a meter, they drop off the standby. So that does drop off each year.
So does that mean you're getting $274,000 in just people standing by?
Yes.
Okay, wow.
Yes.
Okay.
It's basically, it's a water availability. So if somebody wants a
Okay.
meter, that money goes towards maintaining the tanks, the wells, the system to provide the water to the system. And that was voted on by the people years ago.
And with these additional meters, the 40, did you say 40?
We're budgeting 48 per year, just being conservative on the amount of new connections. It's been slightly above that the last 2 or 3 years.
And you think the water usage is the same or kind of staying the same, even though we have 40 to 50 new people?
Yeah,
Just
couple
curious.
components with that. So the amount of water that was used went up a little bit last year. We're not projecting an increase from that, but we did drop our unaccounted for water when we replaced our the meters. And we are down to, I think the latest number I had was 12%, and we were up in the 14 to 15% range.
So that made up the difference.
Yeah, so
Okay.
it all, there's a lot of moving parts to the
Okay.
puzzle there.
Thanks.
Go ahead, David.
Thank you, Don. I guess the next line we're looking at is the park and recreation fees, just fees for renting the 2 community centers, pretty small. We don't budget any increases in those areas. Just next line, we go down to the other services income. We're not budgeting any changes in that. So the first line is our disconnection fees, and let's see. Yeah. So a lot of those fees and the credit card fees that people pay in the office for using the credit card. So we just project that's going to stay the same. Moving down to the water purchases line. We're seeing just a small increase per MWA's estimates, what they're giving us. So we're only paying $18,000 for the admin and the bio fees for the amount of water produced. The $500 there is just in case, just a small placeholder. That's for the Antelope Valley well, the well 14 that we don't use, but they do pump just a little bit to keep it. Yes.
Yeah, to keep the well clean, we have to keep it flushed. We pay over $1,000 or over $1,100 an acre foot if we produce water out of that well, and we'll talk about that with the capital. But also, one of the items that is really good, and this goes back to when the district was first formed and we bought the Meadowbrook Dairy and also purchased water from Aqua Capital, which was another thing. We bought some water rights. We're saving over $1 million a year right now, not having to buy replacement water because of that. So that's the gift that keeps on giving with that one. That's in perpetuity.
Yeah, that $1 million, and it does slightly go up every year due to MWA increasing their rates. So we saved 8.5 million since the purchase of those rights.
What do we pay for those rates?
We paid, I believe it was $10.75 million was for the 2,335 acre feet, including the Meadowbrook properties, which that's also been a bonus because we've collected rent on those properties over the years. And then we purchased another, I believe it was 900 acre feet from Aqua Capital for about $3 million.
Okay.
So we're probably
Coming up on,
probably $13-14 million.
we're not breaking even, but we're gaining.
Oh,
quickly.
we're gaining
Yeah.
ground for sure.
Yeah.
And on those rates, did Watermaster reduce them by 50% so far?
Yes, yeah, they're right at about 50% reduction from what we purchased. When we
So we would have saved a lot more if they wouldn't have reduced the amount. huh?
Oh, absolutely. When we started out, when we purchased those, they were at we could pump 80% of the amount of rights that we had, and we're at 50 now. But we're holding steady. We think at 50 and should be good.
that brings us down to our salary section. So in the salary section, the first line is our main, all salaries and wages. And the reason why we're seeing an increase in the budgeted number compared to our actual years to date is our budgeted number is full staff. And over the last half a year, 6 months or whatever, we've been short staffed. So that's why that number looks a little bit lower. And but you see the budgeted number is pretty similar to the current year's budgeted number. So within that, we are budgeting a 3% COLA, which is the last estimate as of February when the CPI for this area came out. And then there is a 2.5% merit included in that. A good thing is down on line 49 for workers' compensation. We are getting a decrease in our experience modification. I don't think there's been less accidents than the prior year. So they're projecting a decrease in our rates there. So there's a $13,000 savings.
Any idea what percent we are? Just curious.
As the percent of the experience modification.
It's okay if you don't know. I was
I
just
did,
curious.
right. I know the prior year was jumped up to 120%. So I think this came down
Okay.
to like 103 or 105, I think is what it
Okay.
was. Let's see, the employee group insurance. That one again is the board approved an increase to the district contribution a few months back. So that takes the full effect. And then there's a budgeted 5% increase January 1 for the renewal of the insurance rates, which is, I hope, safe 5%. In line 51, the retirement. That's a similar amount to what we're actually doing. And within that $480,000 is a budgeted $100,000 payment towards the district's unfunded liability with CalPERS, which we made the payment in this fiscal year. We budgeted for it in last year's process, made that $100,000 payment. We do not expect to have to pay that in the next coming years based on the investment returns for CalPERS that they've received 2 years ago and this year. That number, we should be closer to 100% funded when that comes around.
And they run 2 years behind or a year behind?
It's 2 years behind.
2
Yeah,
years
Cal.
behind.
So during that time, they heavily influenced DEI investments. So when everybody else was making a ton of money, they were getting by. Last year, we recovered some last year. We knew we had a $300,000 deficit,
A little higher.
a little higher, and then paid $100,000 on that. And it should be catching up, and we should be. I think the increases were enough to where it'll be back, hopefully to zero. But then in 2 years, we'll revisit that again.
Yes.
I'm not sure what it's doing this moment.
Do we have any other questions on that section?
Well, I did want to go back to the water purchases and water sales, or with Mojave Water Agency. We have, due to the excess water we have in OSD over here from the dairy property, we did not pump for the last couple of years all of our allocation in the Alto side. So we are leasing our water that we would lose due to not pumping to another entity, and we'll net about $100,000 from that. I just got the paperwork today for that. So.
Next section, we move on to the board compensation. Board compensation for, let's see, line 54, we're keeping it similar activity for the board, for the meetings, any trainings, any events we go to. Again, we're seeing so line 58, there is an increase in the board insurance expense as similar to staff, all insurance district contribution was increased across the board. So for that total compensation, it's an increase of $11,500 for the board compensation there. Okay. Moving down to professional fees. The auditing accounting fee is a similar amount as we have a 5-year contract on that amount
Okay.
with our wonderful auditing firm. Legal services, line 62. So our expenses were up this year due to activity. We are budgeting for a slight decrease in that, if that is understandable. Let's see, outside services, line 64. That is similar activity going on in that account, and that is due to an increased usage of our HR consulting firm and adding on some grant support for the next year. And that amount is split between enterprise and government for the grant support.
50/50.
Yes.
Okay.
Moving now to our service and supplies section. Line 70 and similar related, where'd it go? Line 79. Those are fuel costs. So we're budgeting an additional 10% for fuel costs, in which we've basically seen that 10% increase over the last 2 weeks since everything's announced.
Already, yeah.
Fuel prices kind of held steady for the last year and a half or so. So some ups and downs. We're budgeting a 10% increase to fuel costs there. Line 73 for education and training. There's a slight increase there due to we are expecting two employees to enroll in the employee assistance to education program. From what we had in current year, we're expecting 2 more to take advantage of that. Moving on to line 77 and 78, insurance, our property liability and our vehicle insurance. The SDRMA estimates we received in February are showing a 9% increase. That's not with any additional assets in there. That's just their increase they're giving us. Fuel costs, there's the same 10%. Moving down to repair and maintenance, line 84. There's a reduction over current year expenses of $196,000. That is due to the tank maintenance contract that we have. We've been paying $270,000 a year for the recoating of all the paints and all that. This year it drops. Now we're only gonna be paying $50,000 a year. So I don't know if Don or Sean could speak more to that. We're doing less work or less tanks. I just know.
Yeah, we had a number of tanks that we had designated as being needing to be recoated. They're dropping off. We're not having to recoat this year on the tanks. I think we're pretty well caught up. And with the repair and maintenance, some of the things are dropping off because of the new wells that we have, as opposed to the wells that are 25, 30 years old, and we're replacing motors and pumps all the time. The new well is carrying probably 40% of the district, which is amazing. It's efficient. It's
Less
good water
maintenance.
quality. Yeah.
Wow.
So we're getting there.
That's all the interesting stuff I'm seeing in that section. If you guys have any other questions on it, in that section that you guys want to know more about. Overall, we have for the service and supplies, it's a decrease of the 4%, which is the $90,000, mainly made up of the reduced tank contract.
So
Yes, we can start right now. Moving on to the electric, the phone and gas. Solar costs, the most recent estimates we got from Edison just a few weeks ago was a 3.3% increase. So to the Edison, I believe it was over our current year, there was a 6% increase. So now they're projecting a 3%, which is an increase of another $50,000. The solar credits, projecting that to receive about, $400,000 again. So we've got $400,000 this year, projecting to receive the same. Unsure if that 3% is going to be applied to our credits as well, as it's a funny system based on the way it's all allocated, but we're pretty close. We got it pretty locked down of the way it's being accounted for.
What, do you know how many years we've been doing the solar? How long this solar has been running at this point?
Do you have the solar schedule in here?
So it started in 2016.
The very last page of your,
Yeah, it's page 49 of the packet. Or
We're gonna talk about it later. We can disregard the question.
no, it's pertinent. That way you can tie the numbers in together.
Yes.
49,
Page 50, I'm sorry.
50.
You can,
I got it. Thanks. The reason I ask is, we're planning on receiving about the same amount of funds. At what point do the panels start not producing as well?
there was a 20-year warranty on the panels, and they said they should last 30 years. The whole company with the warranty and everything, SunPower went out of business. They filed bankruptcy, but they should really start paying off between year 20 and 30 is when we make
Start really making
start
money,
really making money. We're doing okay right now.
but we think the production stays that long?
The production should continue. It will drop off as the panels degrade.
Okay.
But we'll still be getting some good
But they
production
should
out of it.
be at least 90% or like 95%, I think, is what they're warranted or guaranteed at.
Yeah, they were warranted at that.
But since they went bankrupt, we have no warranty. How's that work?
We have a contract with Site Logic, who is doing the maintenance on those now. And so
Okay.
they're keeping it up for us, making sure everything is reported, making sure they're tilting properly. And we had a conversation, I think it was prior to you being on the board, or when you first came on the board with Steve Kennedy. And we could try and collect some money out of the bankruptcy, but there was nothing there.
Yeah.
So I guess that's kind of how they operate.
Yeah, you wouldn't get anything typically, yeah.
But so far we're doing okay.
did we just leave them fixed? We didn't fix them, so they tilt, right?
Actually, I think they're back to tilting
Oh,
again,
they are?
because it turned out to be something that wasn't as major as we thought initially.
Nice.
Sometimes when you go out there, you'll see one tilted the wrong way, but from when I've been out there recently, it looks like they are actually tracking again.
That should improve efficiency a little bit too.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Nice.
Yeah, worst case scenario, we were just going to put them flat, or the optimum angle, whatever that happened to be for the
Where you got the
production.
best, yeah,
Yeah.
longest amount. Okay, thank you.
To stay on that topic, I don't know if this is the way you asked the question, but over year to date, we are ahead on those. It's showing at the bottom of that schedule. We're $80,000 ahead. And like Don said, in years after 2036, when the loan is repaid, and then we'll really start seeing the benefits from that.
Okay.
Does that cover all your questions on the electricity and the solar?
Yes.
I'm sorry. When I told you it is page 49, I was correct.
I was looking at the loan, I think.
Yeah, no,
I was like,
yeah.
That looks like dollars,
There's the
not
investment.
coming in, but
It
okay.
looks really good.
Yeah, exactly.
We're making some money on that one. Yes, I apologize. I
Nope,
grabbed the wrong.
No
sheet.
problem.
Well, let's see. That was the last page, right? Last one on there. So we're moving on to the next page to the depreciation section, depreciation line 107. There is a slight decrease in depreciation just based on the number of assets reaching their depreciable life and that amount falling off. We haven't been adding as much capital as has been falling off. So hopefully that looks like it might be changing soon with these upcoming wells and Chromium 6 projects. So if we look at line 110, we're only looking at an overall increase in operational expenses of 2.7%, a total of $271,000. So I think that looks pretty good, less than 3% overall increase.
Okay.
Line 111, I noticed our operating income this year, we're budgeting a 600, and for enterprise, we're budgeting a $664,000 net income. And in years past, that number has always been negative. We've always been in the hole. So we're doing good there. Moving on to the property tax section. This is money received for property taxes into the government fund. This amount is, we receive these amounts from the county. In line 115, you'll see that that amount increases, and that's based on homes selling in the area, reassessed property values, increasing the amounts we receive. Line 127. This is going to be the first year that we are, I guess, discontinuing, or it's done. We're not transferring money from government to enterprise as we have done in the past several years, and that amount was decreasing by 10% every year. As you can see, the current year we're in, we're budgeted to transfer $52,000 from government to enterprise to cover operations. We're not doing that anymore.
Yeah, a little history on that. The board decided, I guess it was approximately 10 years ago, to have the water operation fund itself 100%. They were taking money from the governmental fund, which would be parks or other things like that, to fund the operation of water. So this is like year one where water is actually supporting itself.
As it should be.
Yes,
Met the goal.
absolutely.
Yes.
That's-
Wow.
And the water should not be supporting the parks. It can't,
Right.
but the parks and the governmental fund since the creation of the district has been funding water operations. So this is finally to the point where we wanted to be.
Was there a reason they did that? Was it just to keep the rates down? What was the?
Yeah, it was the water rates were so low that it just wouldn't fund the operations. And when the county was doing it, I'm surprised because they took a lot of money from Zone L and Zone G, and were supporting other smaller districts that couldn't support themselves. So it took a long time to wean the district
Recover.
off of that
Okay.
funding.
Okay. Well, that is fantastic.
That's really good news.
Moving on to line 130, penalties and other fees. These are late fees, disconnection penalties. This amount just goes up with the amount that people owe. So it's just kind of directly related to the water sales.
Is this all small, like a whole bunch of customers, or is this a few large people that are?
No, this is many customers.
Wow.
Yes.
Are they repeat offenders?
Yes.
They could
Yeah.
probably cut their rates down.
They could probably cut in half if they paid on
Yeah.
time, maybe.
Yeah.
Yes.
We have what, probably on the shut off list, how many
It's-
average per month?
I think it's down to about 90 per month. I would say there was a time when it was slightly over 100, but now I think it's about 90 every single month. And like I hear in the office, it's usually the same people, right?
Yeah.
It's crazy. You
Yeah.
can't pay your water bill, you get disconnected and you have to pay more.
Yeah,
So it
yeah.
just doesn't make sense.
Line 133, the solid waste franchise fee, that amount is just going up based on the estimated CPI. So that's a total revenue of $407,000.
I did receive a letter today from CR&R saying that they were not going to raise the rates. They need more time to just see what it looks like, what normal looks like. And the only increase is, as David said, would be the CPI, the 3%.
Have they even started the rate study yet, or they still want to wait?
No, they're still gathering money. We have
Good.
Habib in the queue to review whatever they put together. But at this point, they have not provided us with anything. So
That's more good news.
yeah, that is great news.
So does that come from CRNR?
Yes.
Where do you get it from?
So CR&R collects the funding. We get a percentage of the income from the rates from CR&R,
Franchise.
the franchise fee.
Okay.
That franchise fee has been in place for ever. And that franchise fee went to this county of San Bernardino until we took on solid waste.
Previously,
And then that
okay.
now comes into our district.
And that's because they're contracted for the area? Is
That's
that why?
correct.
Okay.
I guess we move down to meter installations, connection fees. Line 137, we're budgeting a total revenue of $120,000. It's going down based on, we're budgeting an average of 4 per month. We do see it is slightly higher this year, but over the last 2 or 3 years, it's trending down. So I just wanted to use a conservative number there, and it's the same. We're using the same number for the capacity fees that we receive in line 139, which is 576,000. And of that 576, we'll see later, half of that is put aside in a reserve account for future water rights that may be available to purchase.
Back when the district was first formed, we went through, there's probably 4 or 5 years where we did a total of maybe 3 meters in a period of 4 to 5 years. There was no construction, there was no income from that coming in. But we're fairly consistent and steady at this point.
Yes.
Is there going to be an increase in meter installation fees this year? Or is that scheduled to go up too for the next couple of years?
I believe that does go up by the construction CPI number as
CPI
well.
is,
Yeah.
okay.
Moving down to line 142, interest income. We're going to you're seeing a budgeted amount of 1,276,000 for combined enterprise and government. So that's going to be less than year to date. Year to date income received was basically we got 4.5% on all of our money. And I'm budgeting a 4.2% over the next year due to just declining interest rates. That also has to do with the Civic Center funds or the Civic Center project starting and us starting to use those funds as well. So less money to invest. But it's still 4.2% earning $1 million, whereas in 4 or 5 years ago, we were getting maybe $300,000 or something. So
Wow.
property rental income in the government side, we have $133,000 we're budgeting for that based on our current leases intact, which is less than current year because we've sold some property and the Aspen leaving the site. So that's why that is down. You'll see the chromium 6 surcharge on this, in this section on line 149. That amount is based on this 9.71 surcharge on everybody's bill. Based on that number, it's $859,000. And then that just turns around and that funds our chromium 6 projects. Were there any questions in that section, Gina? Sorry.
No.
Okay. And the next section on line 157, that is where you see the chromium 6 surcharge monies being expensed and just pulled out, just the same amount. Interest expense, line 154, that amount is going to go down every year based on the paying down of principal on the loans.
On the Chrome 6 rate, did we talk about, since we changed the capital improvement projects, was that going to get extended out a little longer? I forgot how the conversation was.
Yeah. So the latest, and I don't have the dates, and I should have had that information with me.
That's right.
But originally that was going to go on for another, I believe it was 2036.
20 to 29. It was going to expire in February of 29
Okay, February of 29.
originally.
And then the
current plan we have in place right now,
mhm.
without the modifications that we did, we were gonna pay off the projects, the 3.3 million remaining to be spent in February of 29.
Yes, but so going back to the original $17 million project that we had for chromium, I believe it was going to be 2033 or something like that. So we've actually, when it's all said and done, we'll be $5 million less than the 17 million. The surcharge will end about 5 years earlier than what we had anticipated back when we started the chromium project. And then we had another component to that, which was $1.43?
241 is what it started.
$2.41. And that would have been in perpetuity. And that was the operation and maintenance for the blending project. And that would have gone up by 3% a year forever, or until it was folded into the rates. But that will never be implemented. So we're
So the
cutting
big
off 5 years.
picture is we managed everything very well.
Yeah, we're $5 million less than the initial budget in the dollars from 10 years ago. So it probably would have been more. We're ending 5 years early on the 971, and we're never implementing the next phase of that project.
Oh,
Thank you.
Thank you, Don. I think that brings us down to line 162. Our net income for enterprise is coming in at $1,900,000. For government, $2,115,000, for a combined amount of $4,016,000 of net income. We back out the funding for depreciation and the principals due on loans. That brings our enterprise down to $1,674,000. And for the board approved transfers, the borrowing of the reserves to buy the water rights in 2012 and 2015, that's where you see on line 167 and 68, the $279,000. That is amounts being transferred back to repay the reserves.
If we go back to line 164,
Okay.
does that include the repayment for the Civic Center building?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because we are going to start spending that money.
We've already started repaying that loan.
Yeah.
Yes.
The good thing is the interest we're getting on that money
Matches.
is very, very close.
So we come down to line 170, that leaves so if we have 60% of our depreciation that the board approved to fund capital, which is the 941,000 to, on enterprise section, and our capital project spending for enterprises is $566,000. And this is the district's portion. This isn't the grants and the loans and all that, just the district's portion of the CIP. It's the 566 for water, $3,618,000 for the parks, which is the civic center and the park expansion, for a combined amount of the $4.1 million. So that leaves our total net cash flow, line 173, after CIP, for enterprise of $1,200,000. For government, it's a negative 1.5 million, for a combined $364,000. And that's just our net cash flow in which government has been in the positive for many years. So they've built up the money to be able to now do some of these capital projects. The repayment of the reserves I was looking at. So line 167 and 68, when we're talking about repaying the reserves, the balance on those loans as of 6/30/2025, after we make the transfers for the fiscal year we're in, will be $1,050,000. So if we're able to make these same transfers for the next 2 years, it'll be paid off at fiscal year in 27. We'll have repaid our reserves. So are there any other questions on that?
No.
Then, so we're happy. The 6% looks good. We're happy with that. It's covering everything. Moving on to page 9. Page 9 is a summary of the CIP projects that were discussed in the prior finance meeting and the board meetings, the budget meetings. This is a summary of the projects and their funding sources. So you see line 1, Chromium 6 project, we're spending $6.5 million. And the funding source we're seeing is coming from the Chromium 6 surcharge. So that $6.5 million is with the modifications, the updates that we'd like to see, which I believe is going to be going to the engineering committee next week, board tomorrow, for you guys to look at. The list of the projects is on page 10, the updated CIP project, where you can see the 6.5 million in the top section, the section 1.
And I'll be going over that when we get done with this page. I'll kind of go over the capital projects and how we're shifting that.
Okay.
And
So
why.
then we have, line 2 is the Civic Center. We have the $6 million loan, and we have a grant for $2 million and another grant for $500,000 this year. Well, planning to be spent in this budget year. Some other items on there. Items 6 and 7 are parks portion of the expansion project in the Civic Center. Item 11, I believe there's 3 vehicles budgeted there. So you have 1 for water operations, you have 2 for government. And the various funding sources on the very bottom, where it says grant and loan detail, just breaking out sections D and H above for the funding sources, is showing that we have a $6 million loan and we are getting $5.1 million in grants to help fund for all of our projects. And Director Mills, I know this is the first time seeing this summary sheet. If you have any questions on it,
Yeah, I thought we only had 2.5 in grants, so that's a big number difference.
Yeah, so when we did last year, we had 2.5 in grants. And then we did solidify the 6A tank, that other $2 million. And we actually, it's budgeted for 2.7, but we think we can be really close to that 2 million. And it appears now that we do not have a matching component to that. So there's a potential of saving maybe $500,000 right there. But until that happens, we still have to plan for the worst case, but we have it budgeted and it's what we thought originally on that.
Okay.
That was the grant for Reservoir 6A, there's no match?
Through 6A, there may not be a match.
May not be.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah. Then if you want, I can take over on page 10 if you want to go to our capital improvement. There's a lot of red on this page that you can see. And I'm going to give you the high level overview of this. At our next meeting, we're going to be walking through the entire timeline of the Chromium 6 project. And we're trying to condense it to where it's easy to understand. It can get so technical on the requirements from the state. Obviously, we don't have any choice but to meet the standards that have been set out. So if you look at the top section, the Chromium 6 projects, we had 450,000 budgeted for well 14 profiling, and also another $150,000 for well 12 to equip it with the packer. So the amount that it costs for us to replace the water when we pump well 14 is over $1,100 an acre foot, which just puts it, we never want to pump that unless we have to in an emergency. So we think that taking that 450,000 that we had planned on using towards meeting the Chromium 6 goal, we think we can use it someplace else, including the $150,000 for well 12. That gives us about $600,000 that we're not going to use for those specific Chromium projects. If you go down to line, it's line 8, in the year 2930, we had $2.8 million budgeted for a well at that point. We were looking at what the projected cost would be, and that's probably not a bad guess. But we are proposing to move that well into 25-26 in drilling 2 wells at one time. We can do it for less than the 2.8. I think we figured about $2 million for that well. And the reason that we'd like to move that over into the 25-26 is we have to meet a couple of things. We have to meet our maximum day demand for including our fire flows. And if we don't do well 12 and well 14, that production drops off. So we lose a significant amount of production. So we need to make up that production. We've looked at a couple of different ways to do that, and we're gonna be presenting that to the board. One would be a line down to the dairy, to the wells down there. We like that concept, but if you look at what it's actually going to cost, and with the increases with the tariffs and everything, and we're pricing that project as if we were bidding it out. That project would have been over $3.5 million. So we don't feel that it's practical at this point, and we're not recommending that we go that direction, even though it's still on the table for consideration. We think we could do these 2 wells in the range of $4 million. So what it would do, we would extend the Chromium 6 surcharge out for, was it 1.5 or how many years? 18 months from what the board had approved in the past. But even with that 18 months, it's still approximately 5 years than what we had projected initially. And we don't have to have that additional cost that we had talked about either. And the reason we were able to keep the budget down to the 6% range was we took all of these projects. If you look at line 3, the reservoirs, line 4, the master plan pipelines, over the years, we have about close to $8 million worth of savings by pushing those projects off. Those projects can be funded by developers, and we just don't feel they're necessary at this point and having to jack their rates up to an unacceptable level. So what we're going to be proposing to the engineering committee is what I'm talking about right here, moving that well, which is well number 16, up into the 25-26 budget. We will have some savings by drilling the wells concurrently, which is immediately wiped out by the cost of the steel and the casings and the tariffs. But we still think that that is our best bet. By the time we add in the grants that we're receiving, the $2 million for tank 6A, that makes it more affordable. And it really is able to keep our rates down to what I would consider reasonable.
For the project we're discussing down there at the dairy, do they have to make any improvements for fire flow? And will that help us at all with improvements that we're looking at?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So the project at the dairy, we've met with them a couple of times. It's been probably a month and a half or 2 months since we've heard from them. And we had talked to them about, hey, let's throw in together and we could provide you with, if we did the line to the dairy, and you want to pick up some of the costs for that, we could provide you with adequate fire flow, more than you would ever need, and you wouldn't have to have any booster pumps or anything. They, from what I understand in the conversations, don't like that approach. So they are going to have some things they need to do at the dairy. And there's still discussions right now on whether we're going to operate the system or whether they're going to operate the system. They think they can do it cheaper, but they are our wells and our tanks down there. So we
I was gonna say it's our system, yeah.
yeah, so they haven't come back with any, they know that, they do understand that. And they were talking about even leasing some water rights, which is fine. We don't need the water rights, they wouldn't do us any good. Ducommon has some water rights and Hedega Dairy has some water rights. They think they can get a good deal on that. So if they want to run their system down there and take care of all the fire flow, it's less headache for us in the big picture. Just, let them take care of theirs. We still have the wells, we still have the tanks that we can use in the future. And we could even consider, if we wanted to, maybe we want to sell them some tanks, or maybe they want to buy a well from us. So we might receive some income from that, but we're waiting for feedback on that. But at this point, we're not really budgeting anything because we just don't know.
Yeah, sure.
If anything,
Very slow process.
It would be income if nothing else. Yeah. And I did receive information that Circle Green is looking at the home field, which is the one north of Ducommon, and starting them up some operations down there. So we would start receiving some of the income that we did in the past.
Has their tonnage been about the same, or is it increased?
The tonnage is probably decreased a little bit because there's not a whole lot going on while the transition happens. But so when my conversations with Republic, they are looking at, I think it was close to 500,000 tons a year, and we're over $1 per ton. So we were looking at maybe an income, and I don't even want to count on that right now. When they go into operation in about a year, probably an income of maybe $600,000 a year, just on the commodity fee. So that's quite substantial too. And that would be governmental funds. It's not water funds, not enterprise, but that money can be used for whatever the district would like to do. So when that happens, our bottom line is going to look a whole lot better, but I don't even want to count on it until it happens.
Okay, thank you.
And probably, we've been through the governmental funds, the capital projects. We've done a little shifting around, but the governmental funds is not as important, or not important at all to the rates as the capital improvement funds for the enterprise fund. And I do believe that the engineering committee will like the concept of shifting some of those. I don't want to spend money if it's not necessary. And I think that just makes the budget work a whole lot better for this year. When we get to next year, we will do the same thing with Habib, have him review based on the actual numbers, the water sales, the connections and everything else. And then we'll come right back to making a determination on what the rate increase should be.
Is there an actual plan for the old fire station? We're doing a renovation, but what's the,
Yeah, the plan, we have a customer who is interested in renting that. I have a meeting over the next week or two. I'm not sure what the exact date is, but we want to find out what they would like to use it for. And we just, at this point, the building is not ready to be moved back into. There's some repairs that need to be made with the electrical and the drywall and flooring. Because when the county went out of there, they tore it all out. But I think we could get that back together and probably rent out the building for. I think they were talking about some kind of like a climbing gym or something like that, which would be very interesting. And that would be good for our parks programs too. If you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them, or David and Angelica.
I'm good.
I'm good also, and I want to say thanks for taking a look at all those rates and trying to help our constituents out.
Absolutely. And if you have any, we threw a lot at you today. If you have any questions, please come in and, that's what we're there for.
Definitely planning on meeting before we start voting on things.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
that's what you
Maybe
should be doing.
Maybe in a couple weeks. Yeah.
Okay, no, perfect. And we will be going in the board workshops and everything. We will be going through this again too. So you'll see it again and again until everybody has had an opportunity to comment on it.
Sounds good.
And moving on to review of disbursements, or do we want to talk about the schedule of events for the meetings and the hearings? Do we need to talk about that?
We can, if you have any questions on it, those were what the board had discussed initially, and I don't believe we have any changes. David, do we have any at all?
No changes yet?
Okay,
Okay, I'm good if there's no changes.
and we have an optional meeting if it's necessary in there. They give us a little bit more time.
I think there was a conflict on the May 20th. That's legislative.
Yeah, that is the tentative meeting,
That's right.
and we
Hoping
can
don't
always move
need
the
it.
date on that one.
Yeah, sounds
Or
good.
order back.
Okay.
Review of disbursements.
You can go over that. If you don't have any questions on the disbursements, we can keep moving.
I don't have any questions on
I already reviewed it as well. I'm good.
it. Quarterly financials.
I would say the same with the financials.
I didn't have any questions.
I don't have any questions either. And quarterly investment report. All the way down to that.
That is page 40.
Thank you. I can't find the end.
Actually, 50.
Oh, 50, okay.
50.
There we go.
Good job.
Thank you.
Don't have any questions? It looks good to me.
I do not have any questions.
And we touched on the solar. Are you good with that, or would you like to look at it again at all?
I'm good.
Good, okay. How about committee comments? Director Mills, do you have any comments?
Thank you for the review of this. This was already helpful. So, by the third or fourth meeting, I should be in good shape. I'm good. Thank you.
There's a lot.
There's a lot
There's
here. Yeah. And I know how to read a financial statement, so this is still a lot. Yeah,
Seems like you're catching up really, really quick.
I hope so.
Yeah. I have no comments either. Review of action items, prior meeting action items,
There were none.
and current meeting action items.
Have not noted.
And then looks like we're set for a special finance committee meeting on May 6th and a regular one on July 15th.
That is good.
Good. I will adjourn the meeting at 5:03. Thank you.